Welcome to In Real Time, where we as Heights Church are inviting you in for real conversations about leading people, organizations, and change in the new normal. We're hoping that our real discussions about our church's journey will help you as you reimagine and rebuild yours. Craig here, and welcome to In Real Time, where we're having real conversations about leading people, organization, and change. And today we're doing part 2 of our conversation, Something You Have to Know. And I'm so glad that you're with us today. Well, I've got 2 co-hosts, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. How about
I'm
you?
Jennifer,
Yeah.
and I serve as the children's pastor here at Heights Church.
Perfect.
And I'm Bronson, and I serve as a student ministries pastor.
That's right.
Here at
You're
Heights
coming back
Church.
for number 2.
Yeah, I barely made
Number
it this time.
2. I know you did. Barely
made the
made
cut.
it. But we decided to bring you back for...
It was just because somebody's schedule didn't line up.
You're hilarious. That's not true. That's not true. Well, today we're talking about something you have to know. This is part 2 of the episode. Part 2 of last week was part 2. And we're talking about specifically these numbers that are just so serious, and we really want to bring people into this conversation, which is a couple of alarming statistics. First one is that 40% of pastors are saying that they are at burnout levels, which is just so serious, and it's just critically important that we understand where church leadership is right now. And if you're hearing this and you're saying, wow, I wasn't surveyed, but yes, I resonate with that. I feel like I am at that, or I'm getting to that place. I get it. It's because the last 3 years have been really hard. That's why it feels hard, because it has been. And it's just been nonstop, relentless. And so we find ourselves here today, but it's important that everybody understand that this is where we are at in the current state of the church here in America. And it's an important conversation. Not a lot of people are really having it. I think the other prominent stat is that only about 65 to 75% of pre-COVID numbers are actually back in church. And so we're dealing with 65 to 70% of what the church was just 3 years ago. Yeah. That's a difficult thing for people to really get their head around and to overcome, and then to reset and move forward with. So this is why it's been so hard for us, because these stats are real. Now, why is it that we feel we need to have this conversation today? What's going on? What's more digging
just
into
because the crisis that's going on in the U.S. church right now, and that we need to have a conversation with pastors, staff members, board members, lay leaders, and people who attend the church. And the big part about that is so that everybody, and we mean everybody here, and you probably have heard about this on this podcast, that everybody gets on the same page so that we can be serious about where we are. We can take this dive and start to point it in the right direction.
Really, really important, because I know that not everybody in a church understands really where we're at. Therefore, they could misunderstand why we're doing what we're doing. So that's really, really important. I think you were going to speak to the hierarchy of problems, Pastor Jennifer.
Yes. So when we're talking about where we're at as a church and the lower attendance numbers and pastor burnout, the question is why? And so I think the temptation is to look at the symptom rather than the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at all these problems that we're having, attendance and whatnot, it's really because of COVID. So let's start there and have that conversation so we can deal with it.
Right. And we say COVID, we mean all the protocols that went into it.
All the protocols.
Yeah.
The psychology of people. people pulling away and getting used to being at home and then not engaging back in community, not engaging back into church. And then just the stress on staff and senior pastors throughout COVID has led them to this point of burnout and working so hard and not getting the results that you're looking for. So rather than being frustrated about what you don't have, let's define what is the real problem here. So then we can move forward. If we talk about what the issue is, then we can get help.
Right. So that's the first issue is what
That's
happened
the
with
first
COVID.
issue.
Then, of course, all the racial unrest. Then you had the election and all of those things
Exactly.
just peeled people away. And that's the real issue, number one, in the hierarchy of
Yes.
problems. And then, as
And
you
then-
were saying, the symptoms of that, you're seeing those
Exactly.
fall underneath that. Yeah, it's good. Lower numbers, lower finances. Yeah, which are real problems, but they're not the first problem.
But they're not the first problem. The first problem is let's define reality and what's brought us to this point.
yeah.
Then we can know how to move forward.
Yeah.
Right, because
Really
leadership
important.
needs to lead from here to there.
Exactly.
And we could never get there if we don't understand where we are or even accept where we are here and now.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you could see where staffs may be at a different defining here differently than a board member would define here, than a senior lead would define here, than a person who's sitting in the pew or chairs are defining what here is. And we're all wondering, hey, what is the deal? Why is the path different? Well, it shouldn't be.
Right.
The issue is we're all coming from different places. And that's just a really tough way to solve any issue.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't manage ourselves well.
Yeah.
If we don't know what here is, we can't get there.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
So this isn't information that staff should be keeping to themselves.
Great point. You're
We
right.
need to share it with our boards. We need to have a conversation with our lay leadership,
Yeah.
and then bring it to our entire community. We just got through doing that with our finances,
Yes.
and it was to our benefit. But we had to define reality for everybody
Yeah.
and why we were here.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I even
really
have
good.
conversations with other youth pastors where they have no idea about the realities of where they are here.
Wow.
Because their senior leads aren't willing to share that even with their youth pastor,
Yeah.
let alone all the way down to lay leaders and people sitting in the pews. And so that's why it's so important as we define here with great transparency to everybody.
Yeah.
Because then the leaders know how to get there.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and maybe senior leads don't know. In fact, that's one of the things that we've been learning is a lot of people don't know what the national stats are. And
Yes.
frankly, you got to go hunt this stuff down. You're going to find those stats at Barna Research. Really, it's not found anywhere else outside of that. No one else is really having this conversation, which is why we are, because we want to help people. But yeah, it's important that we know those stats and that we can share those with one another. Because if we don't know them, then honestly, as a senior lead, I'm thinking, what's wrong with me?
Exactly.
What's wrong with me? And that is a really difficult place to be. And I feel so vulnerable when I'm thinking that. So I don't want to share it with anybody. I'm hoping they don't notice, you know? Or, there's just, it's a difficult place to be. And if this is where we're at, it's unfair to hold pastors responsible for these results,
Exactly.
these numbers, because it's a national issue, not just a local issue. And so instead of pointing fingers, we need to be able to rally around one another and help one another out. But there are some things that we've been learning about how
Yes.
pastors are experiencing that. Can we just hit a couple of those bullet points? Because I know we covered this in the last podcast, but this is important to set us up for today.
Yeah, you've already mentioned one is many of them don't know the national stats.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of
Yeah.
establishing it. Another one was,
That they feel alone
yep,
because they don't know the stats,
Yeah.
and they're not sharing information with their staff and their lay leaders and their church community. So that's going to leave you feeling alone
Yeah.
and vulnerable
Yeah.
and
Will.
stuck, really.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And if you don't know the national stats, then you don't know that we're in a national crisis.
yep, yep.
and therefore we don't know
know.
what season we're in.
Exactly.
You don't know what season you're in. That's a difficult place to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
hard to navigate, which is why this thing is so hard to navigate.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to bring some clarity and some voice to this, and people may not agree with everything we have to say. I'm pretty sure they won't, but
Yeah.
I hope that it gets people thinking and talking and say, well, then what do you think about it? And how will you address it? How do you answer the question?
Yep.
So, but there is hope because
Right.
you and I,
Right.
we know that when we figure out what here looks
Yes.
like, and we can define that and be
Yeah.
on the same page with the board, staff, with the person in our church, the lay leaders, when we're all on the same page, we can get to there.
Yes.
But we
Yeah.
do have to figure out what here looks like. So
Exactly.
from
Find the
here
reality.
to there, in every church, these are things we're going to talk about today that they're something every church can relate to. So we talked about just two things last time. We won't dig into those, but what was that? So we won't touch on them today, but what were those?
We talked about finances.
Yep.
And
big one.
about our One Fund campaign
Yep.
as an answer to that.
Right.
And how we wanted to make ministry the focus again.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that we hit last time.
Yeah. And then there was one more.
Leadership is tired
Leadership is tired.
and
Yeah.
likely at burnout levels.
Yes.
Yeah. We know 4 out of 10 are 10 at 4 out of 10. So those are things we talked about last time, and this time we want to dive into some new stuff about defining what here looks like. And I think the first thing is really trying to understand what success looks like now. And are we all working with the same expectations of what success looks like?
Yeah, that's so good.
Now? Because if we think this is all going back to pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, we're just not dealing with reality. That is not reality.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know a church. I know they're out there, but I don't know a church personally that is where they were or actually in even better situation. And so when you look at the whole thing, we need to really understand, what does success look like now? What expectations are realistic for us? Because it's not going to back to where it was. But it doesn't have to be where it was for us to begin again, right? And I think that's really what we want to try to help people get, is that it's time to begin again.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you did for us, Pastor Craig. You inspired us to be pioneers and that we're going to be planting a church again. So we had to look at Heights Church as a church plant. It's a new church and we're starting over and we're resetting numbers.
Yeah.
We're looking at who we have today,
Yeah.
who are our resources. People are our greatest resource. And we're going to stop looking at who left and we're going to look at who's here.
Yeah.
And I think that you doing that for us gave us all freedom to let go of, okay, what our kids camp was pre-COVID,
Yeah.
I'm not looking at that anymore. I'm looking at what it is right now and what I can do with what I have.
That's good.
And that opens up creativity.
Right. It really does.
It does.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're stuck.
You're stuck in disappointment because the numbers are lower in
You're
almost
depressed.
every category.
I know.
Yeah. No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
When we were in that season of COVID, it's like you have to ask for fresh eyes today. Because if you
Yes.
really think about it, like we got kicked out of a building. We talk about it's like church planting again. Well, we didn't have a building during COVID because you weren't allowed to go inside with
Yeah.
people around. And so when you were forced outside, it was like that.
Yeah.
And when you finally got to go back in, you're like, well, what do we do now?
Exactly.
Do we have to do the same?
Right.
And there's a lot of people who get really excited about that. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
people who are just like, I hate the thought of that. And I think you encouraged us, like, no matter where you were, let's try to get excited and be visionaries. And you instilled that confidence, as she said. We sat in a room and you told us, you're all capable of doing this. And you encourage us to step into what God was calling us into as a lead. And it was significant for us.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad. Well, and it gave me permission to do the same. A lot of experimenting and just, hey, we got to go figure this out, you guys. We got to go figure this out. So, really important. And I think that this idea of what does success look like now, I know that one of those pieces was the online.
Yes.
That was something we were toying with before pandemic, but But now we really leaned into it hard, and then as we started coming out, we had a decision. What do we do? Do we go ahead and say, oh, well, okay, that was good for that season, but not now? Or do we lean into it harder? What are people going to do? How do we want to think about it? And we actually have done some numbers very recently that help us to understand how online has helped us and is currently helping us. And so I think we just did a census. We like to do these every year, actually, prior to COVID, but we just did it for the first time since all that broke out. So the first time in 3 years, we did a census of our church. So what are you
I was going to say,
about?
and how many weeks, just so people who are listening know how long this census took?
It took 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
It took
We're
8
talking
weeks.
about it on stage. Make sure.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, fill out the card. If you call this place your home.
Yep.
We collected all of that data. We collected data from life groups. We collected data from
Kids ministry
kids
attendance.
ministry attendance. So we know that
Giving.
they were there giving. If you gave, we know you were here.
Yeah.
So, and when you add all of those
Online
together,
profiles.
online profiles. When you add them all together, we know that they were here. And so, yes, we count you. We know that you were here personally. And so that was huge for us to understand that, so that we could assess what we are currently today.
Yeah.
And that's where we begin. Yeah, we don't have to compare it to prior. We just say this is where we're at today. And so that's really important. And the number was less, right?
It was, but not significantly.
Yeah,
I think the number was 2,460.
Yeah.
And pre-COVID, we were a 3,000 plus church.
Yeah.
But for me, why that number is so powerful is on Sunday, our average in-person attendance is 600.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
But really, our entire community is 2,460.
Yeah.
So that's powerful.
Yeah.
That explains how hard we're working.
Yes, it is. So you've got that 600 in person, then you have another 600 online.
Yes.
And yes, with that weekend attendance, and then you have the overall. Those are all numbers
Those
that
are all
we
numbers.
have to look at and understand to
And
get our head around what success
exactly.
looks like today.
And understand that not everybody attends in person every week.
Right.
Yeah.
So we definitely see that, and that
calls
explains for the larger number.
Yeah.
But also, we found as a result is that our online people are pretty regular.
Yes.
Like they're either in person or they're watching online.
Yeah.
And
They're
so
pretty
we
consistent.
found that that's been a huge benefit
Right.
to our stability and growth, really.
That's right. Yeah. And to remind people that the online community, a third of our giving to our campaign that we did a year ago came from online.
Which is amazing.
So we know they're committed.
Yes.
Yeah, it's tremendous, really. And although those tell a story and they tell
Yes.
you information, it's not the whole story, but it's information. It's parts of the story. And I think what's important to us is that we look at that and we say, okay, here's how we're understanding what those numbers tell us. I think all of us as churches, though, need to do an assessment to understand, what does here look like? Well, we know what here looks like as far as these numbers, and then being able to move forward now. And then, of course, our life groups. We have, well, actually, a lot of times our life groups have more people in them than we actually see on a Sunday morning in person.
Which is
attendance,
amazing.
Which is amazing. So that tells us something
Yeah.
also about our church and what here looks like. So yeah, these are all important, and I don't know what metrics other churches are using, but use your metrics. Choose which ones that you will use to understand the health of your church. What's important to you in your situation. So those were really important, but as we begin again, we realize we got to understand what here looks like. But not everything came back
Exactly.
either, right?
Yeah.
And that's also a part of knowing what here looks like and expectations of what success is. A couple things that did not come back. What were those?
Veterans. We had a veterans group, and it
Yep.
did not make
Didn't
a
come
return.
back. Yeah, it's
Yep.
not because we didn't want it to. It's
Right.
just
We tried.
people lost interest.
Yeah. There wasn't a need
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Other things?
The Heights Kid Show,
Yeah.
which was birthed out of COVID and a huge success and
Yeah.
something that my team and we worked really hard on. But when we came back in person, we found that those families are here in person.
Yeah.
They're not watching the show anymore.
Yeah.
So after 2 years of doing this project that I loved, we let it go.
Yeah.
Because I did not have the team to focus on in person and the show at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay.
It was a huge success
Yes.
for when we needed it.
Exactly.
But it didn't need to become a sacred cow.
No.
Yeah.
No. And maybe it comes back in another form later.
Yes.
If there's a need.
If there's a need. But why do it just for the sake of doing it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that we were able to be flexible like that.
Yeah, there was even ones that I thought about where in between this is
Yeah.
our outdoor summer like services where we had
Yes,
worship
absolutely.
and a
Yeah.
speaker in the middle
Yeah.
of the week, and we were out there when it was 100 degrees and there was tons of people out
And
there.
Man, I remember that.
Yep, and smoke. Oh man,
Oh, there's a lot
And
of all those
smoke.
wildfires.
Wow,
Yes.
wow. But it was super, super effective.
Yeah.
And I could easily see how you would keep on doing it
Yeah.
even if it was no longer effective, but we had to let it go.
We had to let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And those were good decisions. And it's a part of what success looks like now. We got to graduate to the building.
No regrets
Yay. I was
Yeah.
to the building.
For sure.
I was ready to let it go.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
good, but
Yeah. I think we can see why it's so critically important that staff, senior leadership, boards, people in the pews are all on the same page, that they understand what's going on. I know people have asked me like, hey, what's going on, with the online thing? Why are you guys still talking to a camera? It's like, well, do you realize that there's the same amount of people on the camera, behind that camera, that there are in this room?
Yep.
And then they always look at me with their jaws dropped.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Seriously? Oh, now I know why you're talking to the camera. Okay. Never mind.
Keep talking to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got to be on the same page. We got to understand it and keep moving forward. I love it. So something that we know is a part of understanding here is assessing resources. It's time to MacGyver. It's time to MacGyver. And we just did this and we're continuing to do this, right? We're not out of this mode right now at all. So what does that really look like, assessing your resources?
it's not looking at what you don't have, looking at what you do have.
Yeah.
So I would say this year with the Heights Kids Camp, which is next week, I'm so excited.
Gonna be great.
It's going to be awesome. But this year we've had tighter finances for camp than we've ever had. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, I have to fight that
Yeah.
because it can weigh on me.
Yeah.
And I just have to trust that I'm going to look at what I do have.
Yeah.
What do we already have on campus that I can use for this?
Yep.
How can I be creative on what we have? How can I lean into my leaders and encourage and inspire them because that comes from me? And we're constantly doing that.
Yeah. Can I just say something from a senior leadership perspective? I appreciate that so much because as a senior lead, I feel bad about that. I feel guilty about not
But I
being
don't
able
want
to
you to feel
provide.
bad.
I know you don't, but it doesn't matter. I'm still going to. And because we want to provide the tools to our team to be effective and successful. And
Yeah.
when we're not able, we feel like we're failing in those things.
Yeah.
But when you have that perspective and you bring that, it helps me understand, and I'm able to get through that. I'm just saying it's initially. It's not where I stay,
Yeah.
but initially that's my first reaction, like, ah. But then when you respond that way, and I think it's important that staff knows, look, we get it as senior leads. We may not always say it, but we get it, and we really wish we could provide more.
Yeah.
And we really appreciate that you see it.
Yeah.
And that you're just going to do your best with what you have because that's really all any of us can do. And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
We're doing it together.
Yeah.
So good on you. Great job.
Well, thank you.
I know our team is doing that, but this was a good illustration of how that works.
Honestly, my thought was, now I know how Pastor Craig feels. That was my thought. I'm like, I know this is how he
Yeah.
feels a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I have
True.
a little tiny bit of that.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're assessing, obviously we look at finances. We also look at who is with you. This really is
Yeah.
more the congregation. Like how many people do we actually have? Well, we know now, 2,460
Yes.
people, right? Okay. So we know that. And that's a number. It's not the whole number, but it's a number. By the way, there are people who are probably listening to this and going, what's the value of a census? And here's what I would say. The value of the census is biblical. What is Acts chapter 2? 3,000 people gave their hearts to Jesus on that
Yes.
day. Do you think that 3,000 people ever came together again in one place?
Probably not.
The answer is we know they didn't.
Yeah.
Because there literally was not one place in all of Jerusalem where they could have done it, except, maybe outside the wall somewhere. We know they didn't all show up again, but they did. They did count themselves as the entire church, and that's why that number's there. If we don't know the totality of who we're serving, it would be really easy to say, oh, we just have these people who are in person in front of us. But literally, we're serving a group 5 times that size, which is why it's as hard as it is. You're like, why is serving 500 people, 600 people this hard? Well, it's because you're not. You're serving a much larger group. We all need to know what here looks like. Really, really important for us.
Yes.
Yeah, it's good, the assessment. So I really encourage our churches, hey, do a census. Know who is with you.
Yeah.
And then who wants to be a part of the next season. This is about leadership. Yeah. I think we saw kind of a train station going on during our pandemic years. Yeah. People coming and going.
I think that's common for a lot of churches.
Yeah, I think a lot of people.
But it can be personal,
Yeah.
And it can hurt because these people are our friends and we've
Yeah.
invested in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for some of them, years. Like years
them years.
of our life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hours of some days
Yeah.
are gone.
Yeah.
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 And some do come back.
That's
but
right. So some stepped off the train
Yeah.
and others stepped on
Others
and said,
stepped
hey,
on.
I want to lead now. I see
Yes.
the need. I want to be a part of it. And so we have a lot of the same leaders and we have some brand new folks that have joined us now for the next season and leading. So that's really good.
Yeah.
So that's a part of assessing
Yeah.
the situation.
Yes.
And okay, so that's about finances, the people, because they're our greatest earthly resource.
Yep.
And then also opportunities. So what are some of the opportunities that we've had that we stepped into, even though things have been difficult? But as we've started over, what are some of those opportunities that we leaned into?
Yeah, I think our clearest one is the schools around here. God has just created opportunities for us to step in. And we could have stepped back and been like, well, we don't want to get affiliated or something like that.
Yeah.
We said, no, we want to get into this community. We want to serve this community.
Right.
And when we stepped into those things, I think God really honored them because
Yeah.
that's what He had for us.
That's right.
We did this thing called Love This City with the youth
This was
group.
great. Yes.
And so during their spring break, each day we were at a different place around the city where we are. And 2 of the days we were at a local school, a K through 8. And we just had an opportunity to refresh their campus because it was a little rough, and the
Yeah.
principal would say different words than I would say, and it was just so cool to see because it was an opportunity even for the youth to assess what they really had. I'm looking around and I'm sitting in an office and I'm like, how are we going to be able to go out and refresh the front of this school, lay bark, plant plants, all these things? And if you know me, that's not my gift set either. And so as a leader of
But you
that,
did it, and you did an awesome job.
Right. And so it was, God, show me what we have and what do you desire us to do? And I will trust you with that. We will trust you with that.
Yeah.
And God just showed up in miraculous ways.
Yeah.
Like we're talking, we needed bark, shovels, wheelbarrows, food, water, drinks, then people, because I can't just by myself lead a bunch of junior high and high school students, and people work. And so I'm like, God, provide people who can make it to help lead and make this happen. I think a lot of times we would just in the page or in the story right there, it's impossible to do something like this because there's not enough adult staff to be able to manage this. And that really puts God in a box and stops allowing you to be creative with what you
that's
have.
good.
Yeah.
And so when you really assess your resources, you're really asking God to show you the loaves and fishes that He has, because
Yeah.
you may have a basket and right in front of you, but you're
Yeah.
unwilling or too afraid or insecure to ask God to show you all you already have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
so
so
good.
good.
So this project that you couldn't afford to do and you had
Yeah.
no idea who was going to do it with you, I know we sat at a table just a few weeks ago that part of what came from that was...
Well, our church received an award. It's called the MVP Partner, Most Valuable Partner Award. And obviously it's not what
From our school district?
From our school district,
Yeah.
because of the works and the effort of the youth in this area.
Yeah.
And it was an awesome thing that I think God used as confirmation for us as a church
Yeah.
that we are active in our community.
Yep.
And God just, I don't know, just in a way like applauding us, like, thank you for following what I had for you.
Yeah.
So good.
know?
It was wonderful. We
It
didn't
was
do it
awesome.
for that reason,
Not
but
at all.
hey, we were so excited that they recognized the efforts
Yeah.
of those students and your leadership there. So
And now
great
the
job, man.
Thank you. I appreciate
Can
that.
you give them like a fist bump?
I
there?
am.
bump.
And,
There it
you
is.
know, one of those kids was my son. And it was so good for him to go and do that. And I saw his faith grow and him grow as a servant. And I just think it's so powerful that those youth had the opportunity to do that. It was so good for their
Yeah.
faith. And so, as a mom, thank you.
Don't make me cry on this podcast. It's my second time here. I'm just kidding. But one of my favorite things has also come of it is that, like, our new partnership with that school and
Yeah.
that principal, it is such a fun one.
Yeah.
Because you're putting a face to what's going on there
Yeah.
and you're getting to hear their heart.
That's
so
good.
there's so much more we can continue to unpack when you really allow God to show you what he has for you, because it's going to be abundantly more than what you ever imagined.
Yeah.
But it takes eyes to see.
Yep.
And that's what assessing what you have is all about.
That's right.
Because God has given us and He's equipped us with everything we need to complete the task He has
Yeah.
given us.
Yeah,
So
that's
true.
good.
So
but we
true.
need to have eyes to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's really, really good. And I think, I know that somebody may be struggling like, it's difficult to work with schools. I get it. But here's where we came down to. Those are our kids in those schools.
Yep.
Yes.
And those are our grandkids in those
Yes.
schools.
Yep.
So we're going to be involved in those
100%.
schools. We want a seat at the table. We want help. We can come alongside and be a part of the help. So really, really important there. So
And I think
so
it takes
good.
great humility. I don't think we'd ever have that opportunity if we weren't going to those schools and saying, I will pick up trash for you if that's what you need.
Yeah.
I just want to be here
great point,
to help
Austin.
support this
Yep.
place and these
Yep.
kids. If
Yeah.
I'll do anything it takes. And when they hear that and see that, one, it's a rare thing, is what I've been told. And two, they trust you because you have nothing to gain out of picking up trash.
Yeah.
You're just there to support the future generations.
And your ask is about them. You're not defining the terms of what you want to offer.
Yeah.
And I think that's what opens up the door.
Yeah,
That's good.
Yeah, and
good.
and just our leadership here. My favorite question to ask them is like, how can I support your vision? What's your vision? And I don't think I would have that verbiage if I wasn't at a place like this. And so that's why it's so
That
important.
gets another fist bump.
Kaboom! There it is.
Nice. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this one up when it comes to assessing. But with this last part, we're just going to kind of do some bullet points here. But I wanted to wrap this up for something that I know we have been learning. And this is in regards to assessing here and moving from here to there. In order to get to there, really what we're talking about, there aren't any quick fixes at this point, right? There might be some low-hanging fruit, but there's not a quick fix. So a couple of things that we think are pretty universal for churches that are solutions, these are going to be found in more long-term decisions. And when I'm talking about long-term decisions, we're talking about we need to be able to create a reset for your church. A time when you could say, here's when we begin again. And I know some people will push back on that with me. I don't know what you call it, but people have to have a point when they can say, from this day forward, we have a different expectation, one that's realistic and one that we can be successful in.
Yep.
That's crucial.
Yep.
Crucial. Number 2 is groups.
Yep.
Having some sort of a small group system throughout your church, because that is literally the lifeblood, the network that kept us together.
Yep.
And continues to do so. And people are digging in harder to groups now than they were even before.
Yeah.
Another one is team leadership. If we learned anything from COVID, I hope we learned from the last 3 years that individual efforts leave you completely exhausted and burnt out and fried. We need a team to help us. And so moving towards team leadership, there's a lot to unpack with team leadership. I get it, but there's a lot of great resources out there. We'll be doing some helps with that as well from ourselves, but moving to that team leadership model. And then also determining to raise up leaders from within.
Yes, that's
so crucial. And that's about that team leadership. You can't raise up people without team leadership. They go together.
Just do a podcast
Equipping,
just on that.
restoration. Oh yeah, there's a lot there. And then last but not least, instead of leaning into what you don't know, get curious about what you don't know. Don't lean in and go, I just don't know, and then end it. No. Get curious about what you don't know. Go figure some things out, and then start doing something. And your project was a great example of that.
Yes, great job.
The Heights Kids Show was a great example. We had never done it, never seen it, but boom, we did it. God used it in a powerful way.
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up today, I think our challenge is this. Let's get clarity about what here looks like so we can get to there. But we all need to be on the same page. And let's encourage one another in this, because this is difficult. And it's difficult because it is difficult.
For everybody.
We can do this.
Yes.
And as long as we're all on the same page. Love it. Well, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having
For
us.
a real conversation about leading people, organization, and change. If you liked this episode, which I believe you did, you want to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification so you don't lose one episode. And if you found this helpful, you know of somebody that it would be helpful for, hey, refer them to it. Let's send them along and share it with them so that they can join in and get the help that they need and want as well. Until next time, we'll see you in real time.